This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks and coming at you Wednesday morning. It's May 22nd. We have game one of the Western Conference Finals tonight. So for today's show, we're just going to try to dig into some themes for this Wolves-Mavs Western Conference Finals, as I think those have kind of began to emerge here in the last 24 hours or so. A lot quicker of a turnaround on this series than the last one. We had the chance to talk to Chris Finch and Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley at Wolves media availability yesterday. So have some clips to mix in from that. We have Chris Hine, Wolves beat writer, here with us today to just kind of put together some of those themes, talk about what's on our mind with this series. Chris, hello. Welcome back. Are you ready for another playoff series?
No, it's been a while, Dane. I fun fact, Dane and I actually haven't talked since the last time I was on the show, which was 3 weeks ago. Anything new happening with you, Dane? What's going on?
That's not true. We have talked to each other too much. I think I've seen you more than everyone in my life.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, at this point.
We're surviving. No, this is fun. I mean, what is it like for you? Like, you have a different perspective. Like Kyle, I've been talking to like Kyle and Britt, who I think for different reasons kind of have like some elevated emotion that I understand in this. You obviously did not grow up like a Wolves fan or anything. What's it just like being like the beat writer guy as the team advances?
Well, I mean, honestly, this is kind of why you get into this profession, right? Because you want to cover moments and runs like this. So it's, even as objective journalist guy, it's exciting, because you kind of dream of covering like big games and big moments when you.
So you said
get
5
into sports.
You're like, I want to cover the Western Conference Finals. So take this.
I mean, okay. So now, if they go on like a prolonged run, ask me in like 4 years how I feel about them making deep playoff runs every time. My opinion might be a little different. But I did this before in a previous journalistic life at the Chicago Tribune when I covered the Blackhawks, and they made a few deep playoff runs when I was there. You get tired, you get exhausted very, very easily. We're going to be at the point, I feel like, in this round where I think you, me, and a lot of other people are going to be really feeling it in this round. Just, covering this team, and it's every other day. No 2-3 day breaks in between games in this series. So, but it's good. It's adrenaline. It's adrenaline for everybody at this time of year, players and media included.
It is kind of like one of those things, even, in the other rounds, right? I think I was like feeling that at times before games, but then you get to the stadium and it's like, that's not a good place to be tired,
No, it's not.
So you gotta
take your naps.
I took a big nap yesterday.
I'll be taking a nap later today. Looking very.
So this has been nap talk on the Dane Moore NBA podcast. Key theme of the series, probably a key theme for the players.
Yeah.
So I think, Chris, as I was just asking questions yesterday to the players and coaches, or just thinking about this series, it's kind of jarring how different of how much less information the Wolves have about this Dallas opponent than they did specifically with Denver and Phoenix, right? Phoenix, they literally played the game before the playoffs started. And then Denver, I think, what did it get to? 21 times they've played Denver in the last 2 years. It's just like so known. Whereas this Dallas opponent is one they literally haven't played this season, because they played their 4 games against Dallas was before the trade deadline, before they acquired PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford and kind of became themselves. So I'm just like, this is a big theme, and just that it's different. I asked Rudy Gobert about that, but then I want to get we'll play the Rudy clip, and then I want to get your thoughts on this concept.
Given how recently you played Phoenix, kind of knew how the matchups and kind of how that was going to work, and then you played Denver so many times. This is a team that changed after the trade deadline. You haven't really played them. So going into a game one, do you guys have a good feel for how this is going to, like the matchups and stuff like that will work, or is it kind of, do you figure that out in the course of the game?
I mean, they've been playing some amazing basketball since the deadline. They, top 4 offense, top 4 defense. I think they won 75% of their games. I mean, we haven't faced that team yet. We faced some of these guys, obviously, but that group together, we haven't faced it yet. So it's a big challenge for us. But we also believe in who we are, believe in our strength, and we believe in our ability to try to slow them down, and then and also offensively, our ability to find good shots, for our team. So we know it's going to be really tough. We know these guys are an incredible team. They're here for a reason. But everyone in this locker room believes and is ready for that challenge.
Chris, how much do you think that matters?
I think it's going to matter early in the season, early in the series. I feel like this is going to be, it's going to be this way for both teams. Like this iteration of the Mavericks also hasn't faced, together hasn't faced the Wolves. So I think this is going to be a little bit on both ends. So I think you come out, you have a general idea of what they're going to do, and then we're going to see the chess moves come in after, games, 1, 2, like in the Phoenix series, we were able to see what they did from the regular season finale to game 1. Like there was a direct line from like things they did differently, going from the last game of the regular season to game 1. In the Denver series, there was so much familiarity that you saw some subtleties with how the Wolves,
but like
started
a couple
them,
games into the series, it started both ways exactly how we all.
It started right. Game
I guess
one
not the Anton Murray part was different.
Game 1 of that Denver series was, and just the whole kind of picking up full court as well and being dedicated to that throughout the course of a game was like one strategy, for instance, that the Wolves employed, and then Denver had to counter that with Gordon bringing it up and all that stuff. So that was one way in which the Denver series played out. I don't think we're gonna see that kind of stuff until maybe later in the series, because it's like after game 1 you're gonna sit back and say, well, do we need to, it depends on how the game plays out, but do we need to drastically change how we're approaching this, or was it just a one game, sample size of this maybe didn't work tonight, but maybe in game 2 it will. So I don't know how much do you put on one game of a series before you start making adjustments in a series against a team that you don't have a big body of work against?
Well, that's typically how it works, right? Like in a normal series, it's kind of like everybody comes out with their first round of weapons, and then you kind of figure it out from there. But given that they had played Phoenix and that they had played Denver as much as they had, like the adjustments did come in the first game. That won't be that won't probably be the case in this. I think like part of it though too, from it being a less familiar opponent, is there's just overall less information on this opponent. Like the Mavs should be less familiar to the Wolves than the Wolves are to the Mavs, because the Mavs this has been the Wolves team all season, right?
True.
Dallas it's just the last 28 games or whatever it was since the trade deadline that they became this. I'm not saying that that's a big thing one way or the other. I think it's just, it makes it a little bit harder to like use stats or numbers or sample size or whatever to know what type of team this was. Like you had in your story for today, or I guess yesterday, that Dallas had the number 1 defense in the NBA over the last 15 games of the season. So do you like, and then they look good in that playoff series against Oklahoma City too. So are you coming into this series being like, this is one of the very, very best defenses in the league, and are you putting your game plan to get
stretch?
Exactly. And to some extent it's closer to being the really good team, right? But like they were a better defensive team than the Wolves were for the final 15 games of the season. How much does that matter, and how much
are we ready to say that they have a better defense than the Wolves in this series? Nobody is, right? We'll see how this goes. I tend to think if you're the Wolves, you're also looking at some of these playoff performances of these guys and being like PJ Washington, for example.
Sure. Like
how much of this is aberration? How much of this is what he's going to do in this series? And you don't know that yet either. I don't feel like.
Right.
So there's just a lot of question marks throughout the throughout kind of your game planning here of what to expect from the personnel, how they're going to perform schematically, how things are going to go. And then you just have to really make adjustments in game and game to game.
The probably the theme we know most, right, is how Dallas wants to play offensively. You asked Finch about Luka and kind of the pick and roll stuff here. Let's play that clip and then jump into kind of the Luka pick and roll topic.
We were talking to Jaden earlier this year. He said Luka kind of mastered the game in a way. How has Luka mastered the game?
Well, it's one of those guys that's when the ball's in his hands, everybody's playing at his pace. The whole game kind of slows down. He can make every pass on the floor plus score for himself. Does a great job of being able to manipulate the defense with his passing, just, whether he's making the pass or freezing the defender with a look off or something like that. And just got to be able to kind of affect him any way you possibly can. But yeah, it's just, there are very few guys in the league that when the ball's in their hand, like the entire arena just slows down to his pace, and he's one of them.
So, Chris, that was a huge theme, right, of yesterday, and all the answers. You even made a little drinking game joke in your story about like how many times Chris Finch said pick and roll.
Yes.
But that's a pretty big difference, right? In again, to not just the familiarity of Phoenix and Denver, but Phoenix heavy isolation team. Denver, they run a lot. I don't want to say Denver doesn't run pick and roll because they arguably have like one of the better pick and roll combinations in the NBA. But we saw how that kind of worked in the series. It's like more in the slot, right? The sides of the floor, and it's more dribble handoff, that sort of thing between Jokic and Jamal Murray. Whereas this is just going to be your straight up like two guys in each of the corners, high quad pick and roll with Luka over and over again. If you bring it in, then it goes to Kyrie and the second side, right? Like, what this looks like from Dallas, and how it looks is a very different defensive look than they had to match up with in the first two series. How are you just kind of thinking about this team guarding pick and roll, whether it be from a Rudy element on the back end, on the ball, just kind of like all these things? This is the theme, right? In terms of slowing down what Dallas does best.
Yeah, we, kind of in that clip that Finch was saying, I felt like he was also, referring to Jokic as like somebody who slows the game down. Like the Wolves played a player like this in the last round from that sense. I think when it comes to defending the pick and roll, I think you're probably going to end up seeing just a lot of different tricks being thrown at them. I don't think they're going to defend it just one way throughout the course of a game. I think that gets too predictable, and Luka will be able to, probably figure it out as the game goes along. Easier for the other guys to figure it out as the game goes along. So I think the Wolves are just going to have to be very adaptable, and really possession by possession or whatever personnel grouping is on the floor. Like you got to be on your kind of minding the defensive calls and the coverages on an almost probably possession by possession basis. I feel like obviously if something's working, you stick with it until they beat it. But, throughout the course of a game, I think you're just going to have to change it up. And, I don't know how much drop they'll end up playing. I don't know how much hedging they're going to end up doing.
But that's the thing that I think we should highlight, I think Wolves fans who have been watching, and really focused on this team all season knows that this Wolves defense can play different defense in a variety of different ways, which is one of the biggest reasons why it made the jump defensively. I know you all know this, but I think there's probably some people out there who are like, okay, well, you have Rudy Gobert, so it's just going to be drop coverage the whole time, and it's going to be Luka downhill the whole way, much like many people would have thought going into the Denver series. Okay, here comes the Jokic Gobert matchup, right? Well, that's not quite. That's not what happens, Like it's not the way the Wolves wanted to play Jokic, and they didn't, because they had a diversity of ways in which they could guard him with Kat and with Nas also. And then with this team, they've shown all season that they can play pretty much every single pick and roll coverage you want, and every one of their bigs can play every single pick and roll coverage they want. If they want to play up in coverage and blitz Luka or create that wall for him the whole series, Rudy can do that. Cat can do that. Nas can do that.
Mhm.
Might not be that's not like Rudy's best thing maybe, but he can do that. If you want to play and drop the whole time, Cat has 7 years of experience of doing that. Nas has done that some. Again, maybe not their best things, but they can do it. So you don't look at this from pick and roll standpoint in this series and be like, well, here's the thing that Dallas can go at that the Wolves don't or haven't shown. And I think that's probably a misconception that I would understand from people out there looking. You normally see big team need to play defense conservatively.
Right.
That's what's special about this defense. Big team can play defense aggressively.
Yes, they kind of flip your expectations and your identity. And I would just say generally, though, I feel like with this Wolves team, one thing that we've learned about their overall defensive philosophies is they will err on the side of being aggressive as opposed to being conservative.
Yep.
So from that aspect, I would expect less drop coverage and more high wall, more hedging, more making Dallas have to react to pressure instead of just Luka having the ball in his hands and coming downhill.
It'll look like the way Jokic was guarding Ant.
Yeah.
If people could picture that.
Exactly. Yes, with those sound effects. Yeah. This is a group and a coaching staff that wants to be aggressive in its defensive philosophies and make you have to react to what they're doing as opposed to the other way around. So if I had to pick a way that they're going to defend this, I think it's going to be aggressively. And I think that they will maybe initially perhaps live with some of the role players on Dallas getting open shots as a result of this and seeing if these guys can hit at the rate that they've been hitting in the playoffs. To my thing about like, are the Wolves looking at PJ Washington and saying, is this going to continue or is this going to plateau or fall off? So I think that's probably the bet they make early in the series, at least.
I think so too. I want to grab our first break here, but I want to talk a little bit about the Ant specifics of the matchup. But quickly, today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company, and we are doing a live show at Falling Knife tomorrow, Thursday night. We will again be outside at Falling Knife. Obviously, a big perk of playing basketball in May is you could go outside and do things now. We've done very many live shows indoors there, but it was really fun a couple weeks ago when we were outside. I know many of you are going out for a lot of these Wolves games, and your schedule has been very Wolves full. And I know this is an off night, but we would love to take advantage of this time and get together. We're not able to be there, obviously, on game nights and this sort of thing. So it's been fun to kind of connect with people at these live shows, and we'd love to see you this Thursday at Falling Knife in Northeast Minneapolis. We'll do the same sort of thing, 6 p.m. happy hour, hangout. I'll kind of be setting up, answer questions, and then we'll do the live show at 7 p.m. So again, that's Falling Knife Brewing Company. You can look up the address and all that online. It's in Northeast Minneapolis, not too far from downtown. And then also quickly, today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks, and my Prize pick for Game 1. I went the other way. I'm going with the Mavs pick, and it's Wolves related, but I think Derek Jones Jr. will score more than 8.5 points in this game because I think Derek Jones Jr. is very important to this series for the Mavs defensively. I think they need to have him on Anthony Edwards, which to me boosts his minutes total in this, which boosts his likelihood of scoring more than 8.5 points. I think he had 20-something in Game 6 against the Thunder there. So that's PrizePicks.com, PrizePicks app. Promo code Dane for a $100 sign-up bonus. I think this is a fun time to be playing daily fantasy. So check out Prize Picks. Chris, just to kind of not wrap, but continue the Luka thing. Who do you think guards him?
I think it's going to be a rotating cast. I mean,
kind of to your point before of like different looks. Yeah,
different looks, different guys. I mean, ideally you would love, if you're the Wolves, to have Jaden just lock them down, right? I don't think that's going to be possible for all 48 minutes, and you want to try to keep Jaden out of foul trouble as well.
Mhm.
So I think it's going to be a rotating cast. I think Ant's going to probably want and get some time on Luka.
Yep.
You could probably maybe throw Nikhil on there, and I think Kyle Anderson even might get some run guarding him. It's going to be a battle of the slow guys out there at times, maybe. So I think they have 4 guys that they could throw on him at different times, and if you have that optionality, why not give it a shot and then see who's doing the best? Who's as long as Jaden's staying out of foul trouble. That's another thing that I think is an important point to make that they did with Jokic later in the Denver series was, Karl was defending Jokic one-on-one, but one tangential effect of the double teams was that it forces the ball out of Jokic's hand, which kept Karl out of foul trouble.
Yep.
And if you can force the ball out of Luka's hands, it maybe keeps Jaden out of foul trouble, which he's obviously prone to do. So, kind of forcing the ball out of these guys' hands, especially early in a game, can have at least a little bit of a ripple effect of keeping some of your best defenders out of foul trouble early in a game.
I think foul trouble is the key theme to the Luka Doncic matchup in this series. I watched yesterday the only game they played Dallas that had Kyrie and Luka both play in the game, which was January 7th. It was the one time of the 4 matchups that the Wolves lost. I watched that one, and I think you'll remember this. Ant picked up 3 fouls in the first quarter in that game.
Yeah, he was in foul trouble the whole game. Yeah.
He was in foul trouble that whole game, and it was the foul trouble was born out of the idea of having Ant guard Luka. And I think it just reading a couple articles and stuff yesterday and podcasts and that sort of thing, Dort just did a really good job on Luka, right?
Right.
So the logic, and I think this is probably generally true as a logic for Luka, having, much like with Ant, right? Having that sturdy defender, being able to guard him is probably the best option. Ant is the only sturdy defender, big,
right.
Like Nikhil and Jaden are slithering guys, right? They're more the archetype of defender to put on Kyrie Irving. Ant is the more Dort type defender. And to that end, maybe putting him on Luka. I think Jaden foul trouble is dangerous. Ant foul trouble might be deadly.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
And so to that end, it makes me want to go away from the Dort philosophy of put the biggest defender, the sturdiest defender on him. To your point, though, this isn't black and white. It's not it's all they're not going to treat Ant like they did Dort and be like, okay, you're always here. It'll be some sort of mix. But if it is Jaden McDaniels on Luka Doncic in the first quarter, and even if Jaden gets in foul trouble in the first quarter, there'll be that initial burble of frustration, but you'll go, probably better that it's Jaden in foul trouble than Ant. Not to take away from Jaden's value, but I just think that's part of the risk they run in this series is Ant there, and that's not to take away from the job that Ant did on Jamal Murray, but Luka is more of a foul drawer at the point of attack as the person initiating it than Jamal Murray is. Jamal is more of like a step back, fade away, pull up 2 sort of guy where Luka's trying to go through you. There's just more contact there. There's going to probably be more fouls on Luka there. So I don't mean to say this is the right one. This way. What you said is correct, is mixing it up. I just want to, that really stood out watching that game yesterday of oh man, Ant had 3 fouls in the first 9 minutes of that game. And then now you're just discombobulated there. So I think that's
on your heels on both ends of the floor the entire night. Now, that was kind of factored into my thinking that Jaden's going to be the one that starts on him, and maybe throughout the game, then Ant switches over in the second half or something like that. Especially if he's only got 0 or 1 fouls. I think that was a huge consideration when they started, just doubling Jokic in the last series. And if you're drawing lessons from that, you have a good enough defense that can play a more scramble method where you double somebody and get the ball out of their hands. Like, you have a good enough defense to execute this. So why not find a way to, at least early in a game, keep your best defenders on the floor and available throughout the entirety of a game? And if hedging, high wall, doubling gets the ball out of his hands easier, then I think you should probably look at it, at least early in the game, as the way to defend Luka, and by having Jaden guard him as well.
I don't remember if you and I were talking about this the other day, but we've talked about it before. And it is the idea with this Wolves team of how valuable home court advantage is, right? I think we were sitting around before the game before, and we were talking about how I remember back, it was like before the trade deadline, maybe like January or something, Finch started talking about how much more focused this team was on the road and having the structure of a bunker mentality, right? That's what he said. And just your whole day is kind of scripted out for you. I was thinking about, I asked Rudy about that. Sorry, I don't have the clip. But Rudy kind of talked about the distractions at home that this team has, and probably even more so as you get further and further, more family coming to town, more friends coming to town, all that. Not to mention that half the team has a newborn right now. Like the Wolves won 3 of the 4 games in the Denver series on the road.
Right.
And this is a theme, right? Like, even going back to the regular season, the Wolves won 26 games on the road. Only Boston and New Orleans won more games on the road than the Wolves did this season. It was by Boston. The Wolves had 26, Boston had 27, New Orleans had 28. I don't know, it surprised me. But like, this has been a team that theme of road focus has helped them. And at times, the home court, I think it's fair to say, just given how many times Finch has brought it up, they are a little bit more of a distracted team. Yes.
Chris Finch, noted anti-family person, apparently. Like, that's when he says distractions, right? Like that's what
it's real.
That's what he's referring to. But no, it's a real thing. But they're 5-5 in the postseason at home the last 3 years. Like, they don't. This is even a thing going back. I mean, I know they were the lower seed in each of the previous 2 series, but still, the Memphis series, they went 1-2 at home. The Denver series last year, they split the home games. And this year they won the 2 against Phoenix, but then they go 1-2 at home in the Denver series. Like, they are just an okay home team in the playoffs in this era of basketball. So that's unfortunately where they find themselves is, I don't know if it's like you said, the distractions, the energy, the arena. I mean, game 6 was, why don't they do that all the time? Right. Like, why don't they have a performance like that? Or like the 2 in the Phoenix series? Like, it's hard to quantify that. Right.
I do want to say, has nothing to do with the fans. Like, it's not to say that Target Center hasn't been a good environment, but
atmosphere has been fantastic. I'm just always like, I guess you're right. I guess kind of as you go about your day, even think about it from like our perspective. When we go to home games, like there's people hitting you up. Hey, I'm at the game tonight. Hey, come say hello. And you're like being pulled in 20 different directions and. And it's a long day, right? These are long days. They're longer days at home than when we're on the road.
Totally,
for
man.
instance. So
no, that's real. Like just like around the house things. You're like, I gotta get my laundry done. But exactly. if you're in Denver, you're like, I don't know. I'm just here in my hotel room. Like,
exactly.
There's a human element to that.
So maybe the Wolves should just adopt the strategy of they're going to rent out hotel rooms every night before games, right?
It's getting close to that. No, I mean, I don't know. It does just like anecdotally make sense with where a lot of the guys on the team are just at in their lives. Early fatherhood, family, all that sort of stuff. It's just I don't know what to make of that as a theme, but I think it's definitely a theme, and numbers during the regular season kind of bear out there. I have a handful of other ones, but you have anything else that's just like really on top of your mind, so I don't bury it?
Nothing at the moment. I feel like we just need to see a game before we can.
Yeah.
This is a lot of this is so abstract and theoretical, and it'll just be good to
which totally acknowledge.
Things.
Like
yeah.
But this is all we can do, as the the playoffs are approaching, right? Or a series is approaching, is like try and connect whatever dots we have back from the regular season. And that was one of the themes, is we don't have many of those dots right now, just given how Dallas changed their team. I think one other really big one to me that I wrote down, again, not in like a super specific way, but is just Cat. Like, he has had a bizarre playoffs in the sense of just what he's been asked to do. Like, okay, here we go. Job number 1, round 1, Kevin Durant. Okay, job number 1, round 2, Nikola Jokic. Like this, that's not what it is.
That's not what it's going to be in this series.
It is not that job. Which, again, watching that game back, two things. Karl was just way more aggressive offensively because the matchup dictated it. Also, remember how Karl was telling us once he came back from injury that he like lost 20 pounds or whatever, and I was kind of like, 20 pounds? Like, I don't know, man. Go back and like, even just, or people listen to this, go look at like, just look at highlights from the Wolves Mavs game back in January. Karl looks way bigger, and like just of like more like, honestly, like muscle size. I don't know. He's wearing one of those like Nas Reed tees, so he's looking a little bit more.
He definitely lost weight, like that's for sure.
It really stood out to me going back and seeing something from 4 months ago. He did,
and to his credit, he was still able to kind of provide the physicality against Jokic that bothered Jokic at times, to keep him off of his spots and out of the lane or what have you, even while being kind of trimmer than he was earlier in the season. So, all credit to him. I went back and watched Game 7 last night as well, and I think Kyle made the point the other day. Like, he watched it, immediately after, I think before you guys recorded, he's like, go back and watch it and really appreciate what Karl did. And that's kind of what I did too. Like rewatching that first half the other night, that team would have been lost without Karl Anthony Towns' performance in the first half of that game the other night. I don't know. What do you, in terms of who Karl is guarding and what he's doing on the defensive end of the floor, what do you anticipate him starting out with?
Let me play the Finch. I asked Finch about it clip, and I think that was our first kind of breadcrumb.
Chris, kind of against a little bit different of roster construction that Dallas has, kind of to Jason's point. What are some key things you're looking for from Cat in this series?
I think the same that the same things that he's been doing all season, like obviously stay out of foul trouble. Defense has been really high level for him. I can see. He's not going to, there's like not a primary matchup that he's going to have. He'll probably be more in a help situation or rotations and that kind of stuff. Different pick and roll coverages for him. And then offensively, just stay within the flow, maintain great spacing. His timing offensively has been outstanding. He's just kind of waited for the right moments, and then he's been able to kind of assert himself over these stretches in the game. And he's in a good rhythm, so I expect him to, hopefully stay there.
I think so. So what it is, like, we all know who's been watching this team know how to picture this, right? This is a Karl Chase matchup, right? This is a navigating pin downs. This is a flying around. He's part of the fly around now, rather than just the middle of the floor, and he's not as good at that as he is just taking an isolation matchup, but given what the matchups are, it's like, okay, better at isolation defense, but Kevin Durant or Nikola Jokic, you know what I'm saying? What you're a little bit worse at, just because you got size 24s or whatever.
But the personnel you're guarding is
PJ Washington and Derrick Jones. I don't know. I think to what you said before, I think this is a good example of we kind of got to see it. Does it? I always say during the regular season, I always said what team it looked the worst for with Karl needing to guard fours was Sacramento, right? Just given that they played four wings.
They just have bucket getters too.
Bucket getters,
shooters. This is not that.
Right.
Because
Sacramento moves it so fast, right?
Right.
Dallas is a pretty static team. Honestly, like that's something if I were Dallas, I would try to do and get to is like, can we turn up that dial of pace a little bit? Luka's going to do his thing at his pace, but generally speaking, missed shot, like let's go, let's get into like semi-transition, let's force a cross match here, something. But like that, I think they did that more post-trade deadline. Dallas started playing a little bit faster, but we also at the same time kind of know I don't want to say bogged down, because that makes it sound like ineffective offense, but that's what Dallas offense looks like when they're playing through Luka there. I don't think, unless Dallas is really able to play very fast, I'm not sure how much they can hurt Karl with that and let like Karl in the chase. The thing I think we might see though a lot is Luka just being like, all right, Karl, you're on Derrick Jones Jr. Derrick Jones Jr. come set me a screen. Right, and is it might be one of the tests for those series of like Karl defending on a switch, which is again kind of like defending in isolation.
If I'm the Wolves in that, I'm doubling Luka and making him and leaving Derrick Jones open there in that situation.
Yeah, that's where you blitz it. Yeah.
That's where you blitz it and say, okay, Luka, give it to Derrick Jones then and make him do something. Like that would be my counter.
Yep. And I think that's what they will do to the foul trouble point. Yeah. I think that's where Karl gets in a little bit of trouble and he gets a lot of blocking fouls. If he's like that half step late. I don't even remember that you said you rewatched Game 7 last night. I think it was like the second quarter. Like Karl was a step slow coming up to like blitz a Murray, and he got a blocking foul there. Do you remember that? It was
yeah.
It's just like
he goes a little too hard, a step too late.
Exactly. And what that normally a little too hard, step too late normally equals foul.
Yes.
And so I would think about this more, the three ways Karl gets in foul trouble are, I mean, honestly, the first two are on offense, just charges, kind of barreling down, moving screens. And then I think the next main way is getting those blocking fouls. At the rim, occasionally he's going to get some. I don't think it's like too crazy. He's kind of
he's okay at the rim.
Yeah, like I'm not worried about that. But this job is different. He's not going to be on Derek Lively. I don't think so. So he's not going to be at the rim there. So I think that's part of the foul trouble navigation is if they try to put Karl into action and then try to go at him and catch him with his feet moving a little bit. Again, though, I think for people who haven't watched his team all season, we're saying Karl isn't as good at this as just guarding a big or guarding in isolation. It is worth noting he's been doing this for 2 years now. Granted, he's missed some time both seasons, but like Karl has, I don't know, over 100 games of experience playing at the four, and in 80 of those games being in more of a chase role. So this isn't something new to Karl. This isn't even something new to Karl this season. He's shown, and Naz also, because whatever, they're in the mix there. They've both gotten so much better at being able to do this than they were a season ago. So it's all kind of both. It's like, some foul trouble could come out of this, but I don't think we should enter the series be like, that is going to be a problem. Dallas is going to expose that, whatever. Like the Wolves have found ways to be effective and survive that, but it is different for Karl.
That's what I mean. They've been, as a unit, so versatile defensively throughout the season that I'm not so concerned with them trying to figure out this puzzle. Fitch always uses that analogy of what's the puzzle of a certain team that it presents to you defensively, and they've done such a good job throughout the season of figuring out so many different styles. We don't look at any team around the league except for maybe Sacramento, to your point, where it's like this is the one style of play where the Wolves defense has been exposed, right? They haven't really been exposed against any style or any personnel groupings throughout the course of the season. They always seem to figure a way to fit the personnel to the puzzle that's in front of them. And, in the Phoenix series, it was, for instance, like a heavier dose of Nikhil, and, and Carl's foul trouble had something to do with this too. But, we also thought that a heavy Nikhil series might happen in the Phoenix series, and it did. And they weren't afraid to push that button at times, even at the expense of Carl's minutes. So, I don't know what that button is in this series just yet. We'll find out. And, maybe it does involve Carl, maybe it doesn't.
Just kind of thinking out loud though, like so if you say you want Nikhil out there for an extra perimeter defender, which is a good point. They wanted in the Phoenix series. There's ways to get that extra perimeter defender out there without like really reducing Carl's minutes in particular. Like Carl can play center all the minutes that Rudy's out, right? That because I do think, and to Finch's point at the end of that clip, like Carl's really important offensively in the series.
Correct.
And it didn't feel as much that way in the Phoenix series, right? Like it was kind of like, can you handle the Durant matchup? Like we're going to figure the rest of the offense outside of you. I just think Carl now becomes like in those first two series, Carl was like a place to be like, okay, give it to Carl in the post. That creates an advantage because they have to double it, if they do it. Now to me, and then it was like Carl passing off that swing, somebody else scores. This one feels more like Carl has an advantage to go score and just be like, we need to go through you. We need to find you in different ways. We're not just trying to use you as advantage. We're trying to use you as a bucket. So what was it like the Phoenix series? Did he even play 30 minutes a game in that series?
I don't think so. I mean,
I think it was like 29 or something.
And again, like we said, foul trouble contributed to that, as they famously said.
A couple times.
But yeah, that's exactly it. But to your point, they need him offensively, especially if Dallas is going to be kind of defending Ant, maybe similarly to the way that they guarded Shea in the last series, which was everybody's in the gap and in the paint when he starts dribbling to the basket.
You know what rules when everyone's in the gap and in the paint? Having a 45% open 3-point shooter.
That's correct. Yes, having a guy who can score at all levels like that. Yeah, absolutely. I was wondering about this little comparison as I was rewatching Game 7 the other night. Is this Carl's 20? What year did the Warriors win the title? Was it 22? 22, right?
Yeah, the most recent one.
Is this Carl's Andrew Wiggins moment right here? Like, is this his moment? Like where Wiggins kind of did everything. Wiggins wasn't like the primary guy, obviously, on that team, but he did everything that you kind of thought he always had in him. Yeah. And he accomplished it for a playoff run that helped the team win a title. Like, is that kind of what's happening now with Carl, do you think? Where it's like, you kind of always knew he had this stuff in him, this ability to play this way. And it's finally at the right moment in his career and at the right moment in this team's trajectory, it's kind of coming together for him at that moment, the same way it did for Wiggins 2 years ago.
I think that's a great example because I've been thinking about it like the champion the year before that, right? Bubble 2021 of like, this is his Anthony Davis moment of like, kind of, you're not the number one guy anymore, but like you kind of get to the playoffs, and as the number two guy, you just excel. And then kind of Anthony Davis ultimately ended up being the number one guy if you kind of look back at that.
Right.
And that's the point where I can't get to with Carl to make that comparison work, right? Because it's Ant, right? But Carl's been something approaching that Anthony Davis. So if we could like put those two
things together,
doesn't that make sense? I think
you're right. Yeah,
I think that's kind of what it is embracing a different role, but needing at the same time some superstar, just some special stuff,
some
like,
punch, a little,
Where Wiggins was more like the good soldier effort, every time, you know, and to Wiggins' credit, you know, and he got paid because of it.
Yeah,
That worked. But I think that's what we learned in Game 7 is like they needed more than Wiggins out of Cat, and they got that.
And they got it
offensively, right? Like they were like, okay, Carl, you got to guard Jokic. We need 20 here too, and he did it. And that's the Anthony Davis bit into the cocktail there. But I like that. I think that's a
I think that's where he's at, and I think this team has just kind of figured out how to get that out of him too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we hear the constant praise for how he's played, you know, whether it's from Finch or from Ant. You know, Game 6, the praise could not be more effusive for a game in which Carl scored 10 points.
Best game of his career.
Right, exactly. It was, and I think when Carl goes out of his way to play the way he has played, which is selfless basketball and sacrificing and making the right play offensively and taking the Jokic matchup, like they go out of their way to make sure they tell him how much that is appreciated. And I think it's working. Like it's
like feeding on itself.
Feeding on itself, right? Yeah. Like, you know, the more he does that, the more everybody's gonna be like, yes, Carl, this is exactly what we need. This is great. This is awesome.
And then Carl is going to be like, I'll do that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
They just got to find what do that.
They have to find what that is in this series. What is the thing that they need out of Carl on the defensive end of the floor? And once they figure that out, then, you know, I think they'll be fine.
Last thing, Chris, there's a handful of, articles obviously written on kind of Ant in this moment, Ant on the beginning of his legacy, all that sort of stuff. I thought Mike Conley had an interesting answer about, you know, Ant being in this moment at this age. I want to do a little Ant to wrap this up, but here's Conley on Ant.
Mike, for a guy like Ant, what does a run to the Western Conference Finals, this type of playoff experience, and then what he's about to get in this Western Conference Finals do for him as far as his learning curve to becoming the star that he hopes to be?
Honestly, this is like a, you know, trampoline, you know, jump board for him, and just being able to experience this at such a young age. You know, I said it after last game, like a lot of times you lose that Game 7 and then it kind of gets your mind, you know, on it for all summer, and then you come back another year and you have to springboard to the Western Conference Finals and kind of build up to it, and we're able to win that now. You know, you got to do it now. So it's like, hey, you know, can you build upon what we just accomplished in round 2, round 3 coming up, and it's a big moment for him, big opportunity. He's got to understand that. You know, I think for, you know, our gift is we have a lot of guys who don't really realize the moment as much, like how special it is or how important or what we just accomplished last series. So it allows us to come in with just a hungry, eager mentality. I think that's going to be to his benefit going forward for his, you know, legacy and things like that, and for our benefit as a team.
It's an interesting way to put it, right, Chris? Of like, we're lucky we have a handful of guys on our team who don't know realize how big of a
realize what's happening. Yes. Yeah. You kind of need that with a team this young, right? Like you
don't you just think of Jaded? Is it like Jaded?
Right.
Like I not to take away from him at all.
I think of that clip from the other night where, you know, they were Carl and Ant were answering the question about, like, you know, you guys teams usually need to lose at a bigger stage before they progress. You know, that's
how you want me to lose.
How much more do you want us to lose? Right? That's their mentality. Right? Yeah. In their mind and in Ant's mind, it's like, we lost in the playoffs the last 2 years. That's bad enough, right? That should count for something, right? And everybody's like, well, you got to lose in the second round.
Yeah, where Vince
was
lose
like in the conference finals. You know what? You got to experience all this multi-year heartbreak the way that like Denver did and previous teams. You know, and in their minds, it's like, well, we lost the last 2 years. Well, that's enough motivation for us to go out and try to win the whole thing now. Like, who says we have to wait for it? And that's exactly the mentality they have. They just don't know, right? You know.
Yeah, and they should kind of view it as now. Like it's just the way that, and this isn't even like a Wolves and the luxury tax sort of thing, though obviously it's a factor. It's just the way the NBA's moved, man. Like, you know, I was just going back and looking at a bunch of stuff from, you know, 20, 25 years ago, like the KG runs and stuff. And it was all this like terrible, you know, 7 years in a row, bounce in the first round. And it's like, man, that's crazy that even existed. That a team would just like, it was like, yeah, run it
Keep
back.
going
It's
to
the
the
same
first
thing.
round. All right. Oh,
Right.
we lost in the first round again. Oh, we lost the first round again. Yeah.
That just
yeah.
doesn't even happen. I mean, look at Dallas,
that-
right?
but that-
Western
but that-
Conference Finals, out of the playoffs, completely Western Conference Finals. It's like,
but
it's chaotic.
that sort of run, like back in the mid 2000s, where you're constantly going to the first round of the playoffs and losing,
Yeah.
right? That led, that sort of mentality kind of led to the tanking era in a way. It's like you don't want to be the team that is like always.
Mark Cuban called it the treadmill of
purgatory,
mediocrity.
right, or like the NBA purgatory of like being like average.
Yes.
Right. And so that kind of led to, all right, you're either going to tear it down and try to be really, really good, or you're going to, tear it down and then be really bad for a long time. Right. Like that's kind of what that ethos produced. Like it wasn't just good enough to be a playoff team. You had to be a really good playoff team.
And it's logical, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and that's a theme that moved throughout the entire NBA, because it's like, what is the ultimate goal here? How do we get X amount of points of championship equity? And you do that by leveraging what you got, which is, getting bad to get good. And like,
and now we're finally in a place in the league where, for decades it was the Spurs,
the dynasties,
LeBron, and then the Warriors, starting in the mid 2010s. And now the league is finally in a place where there's none of that. There's no expected.
What was the thing Finch said on that yesterday?
There's no, like, we're not in a dynastic period.
Yeah, dynastic period.
Yes, like he's teaching a history course or something.
I love it.
But that's exactly right though. There is no like you don't just pencil in like the LeBron Cavaliers to be the Eastern representative in the finals, right?
No.
Or you don't just pencil in the Warriors now to be the Western representative in the finals. Like, it is wide open in both conferences every season now. And you think you have there are favorites,
sure,
but there aren't like overwhelming, like, this is gonna be the team favorites in each conference year to year now.
Well, it's just objectively looking at it, like the Wolves have the second best odds of winning the championship right now. And I think a lot of people would pick the Wolves over the Celtics if they got there. Maybe not the majority, but like, this is an opportunity to win now. Like, and to that end, like, I'm almost glad Ant doesn't have any of that, like, swirling around. It's just like, okay, like, let's do it now. Take advantage of the opportunity. I think Mike is probably thinking quietly in his head, like, man, you're lucky. Like,
you're lucky.
There's no Spurs.
I've only been here once in 17 years.
Right. It's a chance at, it's pretty crazy to be able to be in this position at 22 years old and have the opportunity that he and the team has here. But it is the opportunity at hand. And personally, maybe this is just a way to wrap it. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm willing to be surprised. And like you said, like, let's see game one, but I do feel pretty confident about the Wolves' ability to win this series.
I think something Finch said after game 7 applies here, which is, our best is better than their best. Like, I think, I think if the Wolves play to the best of their ability in this series, I feel pretty good about their chances of winning it. If they don't, then yes, Dallas can beat you. Kyrie and Luka and the way that their role players have played, they will beat you. So you have to play your best. But I think if they can play their best, I think they are on paper a better team than Dallas.
Yeah, I think that should be the assumption. I think that should be the objective assumption in here, is that, like, and maybe the Wolves aren't going to play their best in every game. I don't think they will. If they did, I think this would be a sweep, because I do think their best is probably better than Dallas's best. Now the question, and what we're going to learn tonight, is, how much does what Dallas does take them out of being their best, right? Like, I mean, you just think about the last series, and it's like, okay, if Jokic is doing that in game 5, doesn't matter, like
Right.
your best is not better than that. And Luka has the chance, to do that in 2 or 3 games. So I guess, it's kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth. If Luka is his best, it's gonna, could be tough. That's the foul trouble. It's all that. But
the Wolves are going to need Ant to be a supernova on the other end, or
which
somebody.
is another thing we need to see in round 1 too. It's like, okay, Luka, you're doing your thing, but if Dallas has no answer for Ant, much like I feel like Dallas had no answer for Ant, or for Denver had no answer for Ant last season when they were just like, KCP, guard him. Like, if Derek Jones Jr. can't do much to slow Ant, like it just kind of is what it is. So what you got like a games, you got anything? Did you officially pick anything?
I don't officially pick. I stay out of that because I don't like people saying you're the guy that said they were going to lose in 6 games. No, I don't do that stuff. No.
I like kind of thinking about it after I've seen it, but my inclination is to believe that the Wolves should be the favorites in this, and the expectation should probably be that they take care of it in 6 games. I think that
I envision a 6-game series too. I'll just say that.
yeah. And again, wanting to and willing to adjust that opinion, and also if they look awesome tonight and it doesn't look like Dallas has many answers, then maybe you slide it around, the other way to like, this could be 4 or 5 games or something like this. But we gotta see it. We will see that tonight. We got to get you over to Wolves shoot around. So I appreciate you coming on and doing it, and hopefully we'll be able to, I don't know, with these every other days, but maybe we'll be doing this pod for like another month here. So we'll see. We'll get more Chris on here. Thank you for doing it, Chris.
No problem. Anytime.
You can read all Chris's stuff at the Star Tribune or at StarTribune.com. Again, I think the coverage surrounding this series by the writers has been excellent. Chris has been on the beat all year, but also the Star Tribune's columnists and the Star Tribune is leaning heavily into this Wolves coverage. So I know you're hungry for Wolves content. No better time to be consuming the Star Tribune, subscribing to the Star Tribune. We appreciate you guys investing in journalism. Right. So Kyle and I will be recording tonight after the game. Until then, he's Chris. You're following him on Twitter at Christopher Hine. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Until I guess that'll be Wednesday or Thursday morning when that episode publishes with Kyle. He's Chris. I'm Dane. Peace out. How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.